The Young and the Restless spoilers a final reckoning in Genoa City. In the shadow of Genoa City's glittering skyline and relentless ambition, a heart-wrenching drama unfolded behind the sterile walls of a hospital room. Amy, a once vibrant woman whose laughter and kindness had once filled every corner of her life, now lay frail and broken, her body ravaged by an aggressive bout of cancer. With each labored breath, time slipped further away, a cruel reminder that her days in Genoa City were numbered. As her condition deteriorated, Amy's heart ached not only from the physical pain but also from the emotional burden of a past that refused to be mended. For Amy, the most fervent wish in her In the dim light of her hospital room, Amy clutched a faded photograph of a happier time, a snapshot of a family that once laughed together and dreamed together. Every fiber of her being yearned for the warmth of a final family embrace, a symbolic closure that would let her depart this world with her heart at peace. Yet, as much as she wished to mend the frayed ties with Damian, the chasm between them seemed wider than ever. His eyes, cold and unyielding, held a storm of anger and betrayal, a turbulent mix of grief and rage that blinded him to the love his mother still offered, even in her weakness. Damian's internal conflict was as fierce as it was undeniable. Every time he thought of Amy's plea for reconciliation, his mind spiraled back to memories of abandonment and injustice. He recalled the bitter irony of watching others bask in the comforts he had been denied, others who, in his view, had been handed the keys to a life of ease, while he was left to scramble in the dark, forsaken and forgotten. His pain, magnified by years of isolation and hardship, morphed into a hardened hostility that refused to be soothed by the gentle words of regret or the promise of familial love. Meanwhile, Nate, whose role in this tangled web was as controversial as it was pivotal, found himself caught between loyalty and duty. Although he had once shared a semblance of affection with Amy, Nate's presence now symbolized the societal divide that Damian could not accept. In his mind, Nate represented the injustice of a world where some were blessed with every advantage while others were left to suffer. Determined to bridge the gap and mend what had been broken, Nate stepped forward with promises of change and healing. Yet, his words, no matter how sincere, were met with derision and disbelief by Damian, a young man whose heart had become a battlefield of bitter memories and unyielding anger. One stormy evening, as rain battered the hospital windows and the relentless winds whispered secrets of lost hopes, tensions reached their breaking point. In the sparse common area of the hospital, Nate attempted once more to speak to Damian, his voice laden with both determination and despair. "Damian," he implored, "I know nothing can change the past, but we can still try to mend it. Your mother's wish is simple, she wants us to come together as a family before it's too late." But Damian's response was swift and vicious. Eyes blazing with fury and heart pounding with raw emotion, he spat, "You don't know anything. All you ever did was take advantage of everything, of her, of me. While you both enjoyed a life of luxury, I was left to rot in the shadows of this godforsaken city." His voice, heavy with accusation, resonated with the pain of a lifetime. In that moment, the weight of his words hung in the air like a palpable force, cutting through the fragile veneer of hope that Nate had so desperately tried to offer. The confrontation escalated rapidly. Emotions surged as Damian's pent-up anger bubbled to the surface, his fists clenching as he advanced with an intensity that left no room for negotiation. His eyes locked onto Nate's, and for a brief, charged moment, it seemed as though time had frozen. The promise of reconciliation, the desire for healing, was overshadowed by the looming threat of violence. In the heat of the moment, Damian's rage manifested physically. He lunged forward, his fist raised in a wild, uncontrolled impulse to strike Nate, a gesture that underscored the profound divide between his inner torment and the possibility of forgiveness. Amy, confined to her hospital bed and too weak to intervene, could only watch in sorrow as the man she had once loved so deeply spiraled further into a vortex of anger and despair. Every bruise of memory and every scar of neglect was mirrored in Damian's furious outburst. Yet, even as her heart shattered with the realization that reconciliation might remain forever out of reach, she clung to a fragile hope that time, if given any, might heal the wounds that ran so deep. Nate, for his part, fought to maintain a semblance of calm amidst the storm. Though battered by Damian's harsh words and the physical threat of his aggression, he continued to speak, his tone measured and laced with a quiet determination. "I'm not here to replace your past or to steal away what you feel you've lost," he said softly, though his eyes betrayed the pain of rejection. "I only want to honor your mother's wish and to see all of us, if we can learn to trust again, move forward as a family. But trust, once shattered, is a delicate thing to rebuild." Damian's heart, scarred by years of perceived abandonment and the bitter taste of inequality, refused to accept Nate's words. In his mind, every attempt at reconciliation was tainted by a lifetime of injustice. "I've had enough of your promises," Damian snarled, his voice echoing off the cold, sterile walls of the hospital corridor. "You think your words can undo the pain, but you're just another reminder of everything I've lost." The confrontation left all parties reeling, a bitter tableau of unfulfilled desires, shattered hopes, and the relentless march of time that neither wealth nor wisdom could halt. Amy's silent pleas for unity, spoken in quiet moments between her fits of pain, seemed to vanish into the echoing void of conflict. The very notion of family, a unit that should have been a sanctuary of love and support, had instead become a battleground where the ghosts of the past clashed violently with the uncertain promise of the future. In the ensuing days, as Amy's condition continued to worsen, the gravity of the situation pressed down on everyone involved. Nate, burdened by the weight of his promise and the stark realization that healing might require more than mere words, began to strategize ways to break through Damian's hardened defenses. Every conversation, every attempt at reaching out, was met with an impenetrable wall of bitterness. Damian, for his part, oscillated between moments of seething anger and brief flashes of vulnerability, a reminder that beneath the layers of resentment lay the heart of a wounded child who had longed for love and acceptance. For Amy, every tick of the clock was a reminder that time was slipping away, a cruel and unyielding force that would soon take her away from this world, and with her, the last chance at redemption. Her eyes, clouded with the haze of pain and sorrow, still shone with a faint glimmer of hope, a hope that perhaps, in the final moments of her life, the ties of blood and love could be mended. But the bitter truth remained, the wounds of the past were not so easily healed, and the path to forgiveness was strewn with obstacles too formidable to overcome with mere promises. As the hospital corridors filled with the quiet murmur of worried staff and the soft beeping of monitors, the drama of this fractured family reached a crescendo. Damian's internal conflict, Nate's earnest but faltering attempts at reconciliation, and Amy's silent, desperate yearning for familial unity coalesced into a tableau of heartache and regret. In that crucible of emotion, every unresolved grudge, every misinterpreted act of kindness, and every whispered promise of a better future hung in the balance. The question that loomed large in the minds of all who witnessed this tragedy was one without an easy answer. Could the bitter legacy of the past be overcome, or were the scars too deep, too entrenched in the fabric of their lives, to ever be truly healed? And as Amy lay there, vulnerable and fading, the fragile hope of reconciliation battled against the dark tide of resentment that threatened to engulf them all. In the end, the fate of this fractured family remained uncertain, a poignant reminder that sometimes, the deepest wounds cannot be healed by time alone. The struggle for forgiveness, the quest for unity in the midst of overwhelming despair, and the unyielding pull of a painful past all converged into a final reckoning that would forever alter the course of their lives in Genoa City. The final hours, a tragic farewell in Genoa City. In the dim light of a cold hospital room in Genoa City, the air was thick with sorrow and regret. Amy lay on a narrow bed, her frail body racked by pain and fatigue, her once bright eyes now dimmed by the relentless advance of cancer. Her breaths were shallow and uneven, each one a silent farewell to a life that had once promised so much. Now, in these final moments, the weight of unspoken words and broken bonds pressed upon her with a crushing force. Amy's tears flowed freely as she wept, mourning not only the inevitable loss of her own life but also the shattered fragments of a family that time and circumstance had torn apart. The sound of her heartbroken sobs filled the sterile room, a symphony of grief that echoed the deep regrets of years gone by. Every tear was a testament to the pain of missed opportunities, to the love that had never fully healed the wounds of betrayal and neglect. At her bedside, Nate stood silently, his eyes brimming with despair as he watched the woman he had once cared for so deeply slip away. Unable to endure the sight of Amy's suffering any longer, Nate's heart ached with the realization that all his efforts to mend the fractured ties within the family might now be in vain. The scene was unbearable. Amy, a beacon of maternal love now reduced to a shell of her former self, and Nate, who carried the heavy burden of guilt and responsibility for the events that had led to this moment. As the room filled with the quiet hum of medical machines and the soft, pained whispers of those present, Nate felt a deep, unspoken sorrow that words could never capture. The attending doctor, a weary man whose face was etched with lines of both professional concern and personal sorrow, entered the room with a grave expression. In a soft, measured tone, he revealed the harrowing truth: Amy's condition had deteriorated beyond hope. "Her body is failing," he said, his voice heavy with the finality of his words. "We are in a critical state, she could pass away at any moment." The news struck Nate like a blow, and he could do nothing but stand there, his heart sinking with each syllable. The harsh reality was undeniable: time was slipping away, and with it, the last chance for reconciliation. Rumors had long circulated through the corridors of Genoa City about the deep-seated resentments that had festered within the family, particularly regarding Amy's estranged son, Damian. Whispers in hushed tones spoke of a future marked by regret, a future where Damian, consumed by his own bitterness and unresolved pain, would one day come to rue his refusal to forgive his mother. It was said that no child could bear the unbearable agony of watching their mother die without having found closure, without having achieved the mutual forgiveness and understanding that had eluded them for so long. The gossip was as inevitable as the falling of night. In a world where love and ambition had clashed so violently, it seemed almost certain that Damian's heart would be filled with remorse for the chance he had squandered to mend their bond. Yet, for all the rumors and the warnings, nothing could alter the cruel march of fate. In that forlorn hospital room, amid the cold beeps of monitors and the faint rustle of sterile sheets, every hope for a joyous reunion had been extinguished. The promise of reconciliation, the whispered dreams of a family coming together in the final moments of Amy's life, had all faded into a painful silence. Amy's eyes, though tired and pained, still held a spark of yearning, a desperate hope that before her time came to an end, she might see a glimmer of forgiveness in Damian's eyes. She had longed for nothing more than to be reconciled with her son, to be wrapped in the comforting embrace of familial love that had been so long denied. Yet, the chasm between them had grown insurmountable, widened by years of unresolved anger and misunderstanding. Every moment of delay had cost them dearly, leaving behind scars that no amount of regret could fully heal. In a quiet, tearful moment, Nate recalled Amy's gentle voice from better days, the sound of her laughter echoing in the halls of happier memories. He wondered, with a sinking heart, if the dreams of a united family were doomed to shatter before they could be realized. How can we ever mend what has been broken, he thought, the question hanging heavy in the air, unanswered and seemingly unanswerable. The anguish in his eyes spoke volumes. Each tear was a silent confession of his own failures and the impossibility of turning back the hands of time. Meanwhile, outside the confines of that sorrowful room, Damian's inner turmoil raged like a storm. Though he was not physically present, his emotional absence was a palpable void, a gap filled with anger, bitterness, and the haunting specter of regret. Rumors had it that if he ever found himself face to face with the reality of his mother's imminent death, his hardened heart might finally crack, overwhelmed by the remorse of never having forgiven her. But fate is rarely kind, and it appeared that the moment of reckoning had already passed him by. The chance for redemption, for a final, healing conversation between mother and son, had slipped irretrievably through his grasp. In his relentless pursuit of pride and defiance, Damian had allowed his anger to be his shield, but in doing so, he also locked himself out of the love he so desperately needed. For Amy, every second that ticked by was a painful reminder of the love and forgiveness that she had yearned for, a silent lament for the family she might never see whole again. Each labored breath was imbued with the sorrow of lost opportunities, the bitter taste of unhealed wounds, and the cold acceptance of fate. And so, in the waning light of that fateful day, everything was extinguished in a painful, irrevocable manner. Amy's life, once filled with hope and dreams of family unity, came to a sorrowful close, leaving behind only the echoes of unfulfilled desires and the bitter knowledge that some wounds, no matter how deeply mourned, are simply too profound to ever be healed. The legacy of their fractured bonds, the ghost of what might have been, would forever haunt the hearts of those left behind, a stark reminder that sometimes, the cost of pride and bitterness is far too high to bear. In the quiet aftermath, as the hospital room fell silent and the tears dried on cold, sterile sheets, the final truth emerged: the chance for forgiveness had passed, leaving a trail of regret and sorrow that no amount of love or time could ever repair. The tragic end of Amy's journey was not just the loss of a life, but the extinguishing of a dream of family, of redemption, and of the everlasting power of forgiveness.